topic is very, very close to my heart and something I truly believe in. I think cultural heritage, innovation, sustainability, what role does it all play in contemporary design is something that I have been personally practicing over the last 25 years. And today we are very lucky to have a fabulous panels here who are quite global and have very different cultural backgrounds. It'll be wonderful to hear them talk about the role of cultural heritage in their contemporary design world. So I'll start with Maria Porro with the first question. How does cultural heritage inspire and influence your work practice? And if you can give us some examples.
So, buon pomeriggio, good afternoon, everybody. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm very glad to have the possibility to exchange ideas with all of you, because I'm sure that, of course, we come from different paths and different backgrounds, but what we share is heritage. So I wear two hats. Let's say one is my family business and the other one is being the president of the most important furniture fair, which is not only furniture fair, but design event, which is the Salone del Mobile in Milano. And both of those two realities, they have an amazing heritage, because Salone is more than 60 years old and was founded by a little group of companies, Italian companies, that for the first time decided to gather together, to bring all the energies together, which is quite unique. And my company, Porro, was one of the few starting a long time ago. So Italian design is made of middle, small scale companies, where the owners have a strong relationship with the creative part. So it's really manufacturing and creative sector, which is strictly connected to the roof. So of course we started as craftsmen, and then in the 60s there was the industrial transformation, but we were able somehow to keep the connection with what we come from. So if I think about my company, the story can be translated also to the most of the Italian brand. So the capacity of mixing the knowledge and technology is a very important part. But also the fact that we had the possibility to cooperate with the big Italian designers and maestri, and the fact that the big Italian designers were directly talking with the entrepreneurs. This was very unique. This was what made the design Italian industry evolve. This constant conversation that is not only about products or how to produce products, but it's also about culture. It's about what the amazing maestri were seeing in why they were traveling, so influences. So I think Italian design is a mix of deeply rooted ideas that come from the knowledge of working with food, the knowledge of working with metal, that has to deal with a long tradition, and at the same time it has to deal with the fact that there's a strong relationship still between creative minds and manufacturer, and this is quite unique. I feel blessed because I have the possibility to know people like now we were talking about Mendini, Alessandro Mendini, or Andrea Branzi, or Bruno Munari, Gaetano Pesce. All those people are very accessible to Italian manufacturer, and it's a small community at the end, very interconnected. And Salone del Mobile is the place that made this happen. You know, once Mari, a very important Italian designer, published an article on Corriere della Sera, or maybe it was Domus, I don't remember, saying young designer is searching for a brave entrepreneur. Because you have to be brave if you are an entrepreneur. You have to be brave to embrace this challenge. And Salone del Mobile somehow was the field where this kind of connection, this kind of cultural heritage was created. That's why in the way we are rethinking and redesigning Salone del Mobile after the pandemic, because this is what we are doing. We are redesigning how we do fairs. We want to underline the fact that culture is as important as trade. The two things are strictly connected and nourishing each other. That's why for the first time inside the fair, we have exhibitions, we have cultural exhibition, not only companies, but also public spaces. This is very important. So we are redesigning the fair as if it is an ideal city. And an ideal city is not just made, and I would like to hear also your opinion, is not just made by private spaces. It's also made by public spaces. And it's our duty as organizer of such a big event to take care of both and find the right balance. So we will have, like David Lynch, an amazing movie director, curating a public space inside the most important trade fair for furniture. And this mix is what has been nourishing Italian design and international good design, I'm sure. So,
thank you, Maria. That was really fabulous. For me, the week in Milan during your fair is probably the highlight of my year, because intellectually it's so stimulating, because there's so many different cultural backgrounds that actually come, and visually, my goodness, the innovation is just so stimulating. So well done for that. Shall I let you talk, Samuel, about your experiences?
Yeah, I think you've touched on a lot of important things. The notion of dialogue, I think, is something that I really, the way that the engagement between the designers and the artisans, I feel very fortunate. Rameshwar is here in the third row, somebody that I've known for almost 20 years. I was at both of his sons' weddings, and the way that we are able to work with people like that who quite literally elevate what we do. And that elevation comes from the mutual exchange, mutual respect, appreciation for each other, but also the kind of amplification that happens when the skills that they have are combined with the intent and the creativity that our studio, our team has. And what blossoms out of that is, I think, truly more than what we could imagine on ourselves. And that a lot of that has to do with materiality, it has to do with technique, it has to do with our training and baggage as designers. And maybe one small example of that is we were working on a kitchen, and we'd already been working together for years and years at this point, but I suggested putting a sort of a metal plate. He had installed this beautiful Udaipur marble backsplash, and I suggested a metal plate for the cover, and I said, we can get it powder coated close to the same color. I come to the site a couple of days later, and he's taken a thin brass frame, wrapped it, set it into the marble, and then made a marble cover plate, because for him, it wasn't elevated enough. It wasn't, but just that simple act of kind of amplifying and contributing to that dialogue in a way that adds that layer of richness. I think too, the conversation you had of, I find, as you had the Salone del Mobile for decades and decades, And that kind of organization, I think, is with events, through events like this, is really starting to gain kind of traction here. But a lot of those dialogues, a lot of those conversations, a lot of those opportunities happen in isolated, I say isolated, but in separated studios with individual artisans, craftspeople. And so I really feel like there's a tremendous opportunity that you guys are helping create here in India for that kind of growth, that kind of dialogue, these kinds of forums where people can come together. I mean, I see so many faces of peers and colleagues, and too many to call out, but I see you. It's great for these kinds of opportunities here in India, as well as this cross-fertilization in Italy as well. So we look forward to more of that exchange.
That's really fantastic, because you obviously spent a lot of time in California studying and working, and now from different fields. It's you never know where world takes you, but it's really interesting that you're pushing the boundaries and letting your craftspeople also design products for you. Gunjan, would you like to go next?
Sure. So I would say I completely agree with Maria and the power of the dialogue between, So the power of dialogue between craft, design, culture, and the cultural imperative guiding us is obviously hugely important and influential. Also, how craft elevates our practices, elevates the design language that we wish to put out there. I think storytelling is at the heart of my practice, and I would say that I've really benefited from interactions with craftsmen. Of course, one is blown away by the dexterity, the skill, the material ingenuity that craftsmen bring to the table. But I think what I've really enjoyed over the years, a career spanning almost 20 years within this space, is the discoveries I've made in conversation. So for example, my first chair is a gold, pure silver wrapped and 24 karat gold leafed chair. And the chair emerged through a conversation with the craftsman about the Ganga Jamuna aesthetic, which is a very well-known sort of vocabulary in jewelry design in India. It's historic, it's traditional, it's the meeting of the two rivers. This gave my design a name. It gave me a sort of an approach and a direction to follow, whereby the two materials, which are traditional crafts used in throne decoration for the past 500-700 years old in India. And I sort of, those two words pushed me in a direction of exploring how these two materials came together and the reflective properties of the two. This was the beginning with my first design, and I've sort of followed this process and this practice across the years. And each interaction with a craftsman has resulted in a discovery of an probably deeply embedded ritual in our culture, something personal about the artist's family, so on and so forth. So it is really very, very enriching on many levels to sort of delve a little deeper into the lives of craftsmen. Another thing that has really informed my approach is jugaad, is observing the everyday lives of people in our countries, looking at the way people live, the objects people live with, which have survived, 1,000 years, like the lota or the matka. And these vocabularies, these forms, I feel, have sort of shaped my approach, my identity. So the idea of cultural imperative, even in a global context, when I started my journey in design, it actually started in Milan, visiting the Salone del Mobile, quite obsessively visiting the fair and looking at how companies were evolving their design vocabularies, the difference between artists' approaches, etc. And a discovery which really influenced my work was the radical design movement. and the works of Andrea Branzi in particular, and how he was looking at the everyday materials and fine craftsmanship and industrial manufacturing as a confluence of, with a very, very powerful storytelling narrative. And I think what it did was it spoke so beautifully about all these multiple facets and aspects of Italian design in a powerful narrative. So I think that's my take.
Thank you, Gunjan. That was very interesting. And I've seen your products, and it's really nice to see the everyday objects just being given like a really bigger size and fabulous, like almost pieces of art, I would say. So, Mort, how about as a gallerist, how would you like to add more? And I really like the fact that you have emerging artists.
Thank you, Shalini. Thanks so much for having me here today. I do feel like a bit of an interloper in this illustrious group, since I'm primarily known as a gallerist for fine art and not for design. Nonetheless, we've had a increasing engagement with design over the last 6 to 7 years. But in terms of my own relationship with cultural heritage, I think it predates that, and it goes back to exhibitions that we were putting on in the mid-2000s, where we were juxtaposing artworks from a large swathe of historical timelines. So we would put a Chola bronze with a piece of Bali crafts with a contemporary video. And for us, and we called that exhibition, picking up on what Gunjan said, Simple Tales. So we were thinking about the way in which narrative-based art and design has been embedded within the cultural heritage of the subcontinent for about 5,000 years. And by creating these connections over these millennia, we suddenly started realizing that art and design were so enmeshed within their own complex relationship that it was very difficult to disentangle both. That's where as a gallery we really woke up to the idea of, hang on, there might be a different way of approaching, showing this kind of material.
So I would like to ask, with your different cultural backgrounds, how do you innovate? How do you use innovation in your design? I like to use AI now. I think I just designed a collection of rugs and I couldn't fly it to the setting, but I got an AI artist to actually make a fabulous background, which really depicted the essence of what I was trying to show, much better than an actual place, because this was imaginative and very, very interesting. So I'd like to ask each one of you, how do you innovate? And is it materiality? Is it your cultural background? What excites you in innovation?
What excites me about innovation is making mistakes.
Yes.
Because this is part of the process. And what we have done, like last year in Euroluce at Salone, is showing also the mistakes. The mistakes of Gaia Aulenti, lamps that have never been produced, prototypes, original sketches. And innovation is making mistakes, taking risk. So for sure, you mentioned artificial intelligence, and this is a huge risk. It's another word which is opening up. That's why, like in Salone, for our campaign this year, we are using artificial intelligence to generate the image of our campaign. But artificial intelligence is listening to the conversation on social media, websites, and creating images. So actually, it's a collective effort that artificial intelligence is somehow organizing. But I'm scared. I'm asking myself, what about the creative part? Is artificial intelligence adding something or not? It's a big question to be answered. But yet now it's artificial intelligence, before was machinery. So think about how industrial production change our way to produce and our way to design also. I'm very lucky because in my factory, in my company, we have the most advanced technology, but then we have people who learn from my grandfather to select veneer. And I think that this is one of the strengths of Italian manufacturer, the capability to keep a deep connection with the handicraft technique, but also use the most advanced technology to produce. And it's a balance which is very hard to define. At the same time, when we work on new materials, we always refer to our cultural heritage again. So if I want to do a new shade of red, maybe I look at the Caravaggio oil painting to have this deep effect, and then you discover that Caravaggio was actually painting on layers of black and then color and black and then color, and this helps you to innovate. And the same when you go to fairs. How can you innovate Salone? How can you make another step in organizing an event? I think the key of innovation is starting from your DNA. Because if we look at the evolution of the species, it's never the strongest who succeed, but is the one that is more able to adapt. So I think innovation is the capability to take risk, make mistakes, starting from your DNA to evolve. And is what Salone is doing now. Starting from its cultural heritage, starting from the fact that it is a fair that is 60 years old and has all the main Italian brands and international brands. So what's next? What's next? And next is being a platform more than a fair. A platform for people who want to, create connections. A platform where to discover new technologies, new techniques, new products, new ideas. A platform that can be a physical platform, but also a community which is not physical. And technology and digital is helping a lot to spread the voice. At the same time, I think that having a place, a space like today, where we can sit and look each other in person, still is very important.
Now moving on to another subject that's really very important, and I think Salone this year is focusing a lot on it. And all of us are also in our own ways, which is responsible design, sustainability. Of course, there is a hand behind everything that's been created. There is a mind behind everything that's being made. But how do you actually feel about, is it through materiality? Is it through innovation? Is it through production? How do you all feel the role of responsible design, sustainability in your practices? Who would like to start first?
So I think one of the most important aspects of responsible design that I would like to highlight is imbuing values of timelessness in design. I think we are all inundated with too much product all around us. The whole disposable culture is obviously creating major environmental issues. We are very much aware of that. And I think one way of defeating that, one way of addressing that is really looking at the concept of time in design. Whether a piece of design will be relevant in the next 20 years, 50 years, is a question I feel designers should ask themselves. And what are those values and qualities that you would imbue that object with? Whether it's the quality of making, who's made it, very important. What is the vocabulary of that design? How important is it culturally, and how does it connect globally? So I think it's the idea of time, which of course is, time is a very important connotation of craft as well. The time it takes to make something is also something that is, extremely important. Another example that I would like to say in context to the idea of giving the rightful credit to craftsmen is an exhibition that I was invited to curate in Paris. It was at Revelations, a 21st Century Craft Biennale at the absolutely amazing Grand Palais. It was COVID time, there were budget constraints, there was very little time, which sort of pushed me to go to the atelier. I couldn't commission new work. So basically the idea of the designer's mind intervening with craft was not possible. I had to push myself to visit ateliers of craftsmen to sort of go and see what they had, come up with a curatorial perspective, which is not difficult at all, but I was amazed at what I found. I visited the craft atelier of stone craftsmen, and in addition to terracotta, metal, what I discovered was this idea of scale and how craftsmen were on, sort of as part of a zeitgeist, as part of contemporary thinking, were playing with the idea of scale. One of the potters was working with miniature pots, like literally 1 centimeter. An absolutely feat of craftsmanship. Girirajji, who is based in Delhi, was working with the same concept of scale, but producing a 7 feet large pot. Murthy Balaji in Jaipur was producing a stone conch. He comes from a family of 6 generations that have been producing religious idols. And here he was taking the feet of the goddesses and gods, or sort of mudras, the hand gestures, and scaling them up into sculptural objects. So these objects, I put them together for the exhibition with the title, entitled them Vernacular Wonderland. And it was really the idea of putting the craftsmen at the forefront of not only what they're producing, which is by hand, but also ideating. The concept creation was done by them. I think a lot of people are familiar with the overscaled kangans that are part of IKIS. That was something that a craftsman had sort of experimented with. So I think it's giving the credit to craftsmen for their mind is something that's extremely important. IKIS Limited is part of my brand, and we produce equitable, sort of the idea is to produce works which are in dialogue with craftsmen, not only in how they are made, but in conversation between myself and the craftsman, offered as 21 editions. A beautiful example is the Chuha bowl, which emerged out of a dialogue with the craftsman where we kind of were, talking about how do you animate stone. And I don't know from where this idea came up that, in the Bikaner Mata Karni temple, there are bowls lying there with mice on, and it's such an animated, visual sort of site, which the idea sort of was wild and crazy, but we decided to sort of bring it down into real terms, and he sculpted this beautiful bowl with these clip-on and clip-off mice in stone, which we presented in Paris to great success.
I know we're running out of time, so I don't know if you have time for questions, but I'll let Maud speak first.
You have time for me to speak about time?
Absolutely.
Just very, very briefly, I was just going to respond in terms of the gallery's role. I feel like in a sense, we're kind of like an archaeologist of culture, in the sense that our job is to go back and to rummage through the past and to bring up those somewhat neglected or overlooked practices. So just to answer Gunjan, whilst you're absolutely right that designers need to think about whether their work will be relevant in 50 years' time, oftentimes you can't predict, because the design and art is cyclical in the way that we view it, the way that generationally we come back to it. And because I think increasingly with galleries looking at historical design material from the subcontinent, it is inherently sustainable, because it is not about creating new. It's actually sometimes about retaining the old, loving the old, restoring, conserving, making sure that it's valued. And I think that change in mindset will also have implications on the way that young designers think.